Now we love clover, but I don't necessarily love clover for our holding plots or our large plots going into the hunting season. For one, this entire field right here is about 1.25 acres. It's a large clover plot. The reason I don't like that is because there's a couple things. For one, there's a lack of diversity, so it's just clover. And I'm not saying we have clover in here, we have alfalfa, we have chicory. That's all really good. You know, it's a lot of diversity. However, it's just within that one blend. We don't have anything brassica. We don't have any of our rut zone blend. We don't have any fall power greens. We don't have any rye layering into here. It's just clover. So it's not as attractive as our holding plots. So that's one problem. It all diminishes by around December 1st. You know, it might do pretty well in October, maybe early November, but then it's just going down, down, down as the frost hits. It's not growing anymore. And so every bite is not replaced, and it doesn't offer anything going into December, January, even the end of November. So that's one problem. The second problem is when you start getting this large, we put a large amount of does and fawns out here that like to feed on this every single day. So they're hammering this. I don't like that. I don't like creating that doe problem. And so we'll talk about what we're going to do with this plot different first, and I'll talk about that doe problem second. It's a real problem. We see it all the time. What we're trying to do then is get rid of the summer food. That's the first step in having too many deer. But what we're doing with this food plot a little bit different is, and the reason this is like this, is we've had very poor soil in this location. Clover, chicory, alfalfa seems to do really well on the poor soil, especially the clover and the chicory. And so we look at an area like this and we're really happy because we've had some pretty poor food plots in this location. Going back a number of years, we've had a good brassica crop. If it was on the top half, if you put it on the bottom half, it's bad. We just had, it runs off a little bit. We don't like that. And so we've had a hard time with trying to grow a really high value food plot here. Talk about that doe problem in a second, why that's a problem. And some of you might be shocked at that, you know, don't you want a bunch of does and fawns going into the hunting season? No, is the answer. And we'll talk about, I want them in the middle of the season, but, and it's not even to attract bucks like some of you might think. But on a plot like this, what we're doing is, I want to minimize the clover to behind Dylan here. We're about 30 yards from the end. We'll have an area right here that might be, let's say, 1/6 of an acre. And then around that apple tree way back there, we'll have another end of clover. Dylan, at his suggestion, and I agree with him, I think it's good, and that's why we like discussing this, is we'll continue the strip of clover and maintain it on this lower side to encourage travel back and forth. So it'll be like an awkward barbell where you have a section here, a skinny section, and then a section down there. And then this area right here we'll leave probably about a 25-foot strip along the bottom, will be all our rut zone up to that edge. We'll just have a big oval in here of rut zone. That specifically targets November. That's why I call it rut zone, with the beans, the tillage radish, buckwheat, and peas. The blend like that, the reason I don't like planting beans in June is because it coincides with fawn drop. I don't want a whole bunch of does and fawns in the property during the summertime, and neither should you. They eat out of house or home. Does that are here today are here to stay. I want a trickle effect. I want them feeding out in the neighbor's alfalfa fields. If you're one of my neighbors, I want them feeding on your plots all summer. I don't want them consuming our resources on our property and then magnifying doe numbers. Doe numbers and fawns, they take up space. More does and fawns I put on the property, the fewer bucks you have. There's a balance point. I want a moderate number of does, and then any number above that in doe takes out the number of mature bucks or bucks that you can potentially have, especially the older they become. A lot of times when does and fawns, when there's a high number, when they're pushing away bucks, it's that older age class. So you might see them grow into 1.5 years, 2.5, 3.5, wonder where they went. Well, they're getting shot by your neighbor 1.5 miles away. That's a common problem that we see all the time. Properties that have too many does and fawns. The first step in herd reduction, a more balanced herd, where you have an appropriate number of bucks, an older age structure of bucks, more bucks on your land, a balanced sex ratio, is to take out your summer food or a high percentage of it. You know, we're dealing out here, we'll have about 3 to 3.5 acres of clover out of about 18 to 18.5 acres of overall food plots. So our ratio is really good. We don't have too much clover, and those are scattered over about 11 plantings, 10 plantings of clover. So they're just small pass-throughs. For example, we have a clover field through the woods over there. We have a really small one that we're developing over in the woods there. You're trying to create travel through those plots to get them to a big diverse field. When we add the rut zone to this, we'll see, do we flip back the following year where we have brassica on the upper half, fall power greens, and we keep all the clover as we're talking about laid out? Maybe that's the answer. The bottom line is I don't want food during May, June to the size of this acreage because I don't want to establish that doe factory. Doe fawning grounds are highly competitive. So when those does go and have fawns in an area, they keep coming back year after year. Guess what happens to those offspring does? Well, they stay in the same location. Year and a half old bucks, and sometimes in ag areas where you don't have to worry about migrating and as many predators, bucks will leave as fawns. A lot of times on average they leave as year and a half olds or yearlings. So when they leave at a year and a half old with their first set of antlers, they travel about 1.5 miles. That's their average dispersal. They leave because of female social pressure. The last thing they want to do is find a spot dominated by large groups of does and fawns. If all your food plots are planted in summer food, then your property is going to be dominated by does and fawns. Those are going to be there during the fall too. So when they disperse, they come onto your property. It's a bunch of does and fawns. It actually repels bucks. Even when they're young, think about it. They were just kicked out of the herd because of female social pressure. They do not want to find a location where all the food sources in the afternoon are dominated by female social pressure. It's one of the reasons we have a lot of plots out here. Now, it doesn't work out that way as far as to have that number, but we'll find like Rhonda's plot over there, it might be 1/10 of an acre. We'll find a couple bucks hanging around, like a couple young bucks, whether they're button bucks or yearlings, and they'll hang around there in October, November, December. Well, guess what? They come back. That's inviting them to the property because they're finding a small plot that they can call their own, especially for that afternoon food source, and then they stick around. The doe problem is very real. We see a lot of clients that spend a ton of money on habitat. And the more they do, the more they put does and fawns on their property, and the fewer bucks they have. And no, those bucks don't come back, especially the older ones during the rut. Sometimes a portion of those do, but if they're leaving because of female social pressure, while we're talking about this, and I hate to interrupt, but we have our food plot seed company, Pure Wildlife Blends, and I want you guys to have some great plots, and it's getting to planting time. July is our biggest month for people buying. 1st of July, we're focusing on our rut zone. When it gets into the end of July, we're focusing on our Big Boost Brassica, our Big Boost 365, our Fall Power 365s. Those are some of our biggest offering. We're standing in our PPP, our perennial plot power. So those are some of our favorites. Urge you to check it out. Let's get back to what we were talking about, but appreciate you guys checking this out. Those are a few of my favorites, but we have 19 offerings. But if they're leaving because of female social pressure and they don't want to be around all those does and fawns, they establish their fall residency somewhere else, why do they want to come back to that property that's dominated by does and fawns, lots of young bucks, and have that stress and hassle even during the rut? So we find those properties suffer greatly to just a fraction of their potential during the rut, let alone the rest of the season too. So in the case right here, we don't want a bunch of does and fawns in the property. We have to shrink this down from being all 1.25 acres of clover to maybe 1/6 of an acre here, 1/7 of an acre down there, whatever that number is. And then we'll have about 3/4 of an acre of a center of the deer season, very diverse blend in our rut zone blend that we can actually target to hold and attract mature bucks to the property and balance out those numbers a little bit. And we have the luxury of I've been to over 1,400 properties personally in the United States, 26 states. I don't know of another deer manager. I'm not saying there's not one that's been to that many properties, especially covering over a large area of the United States. And then between Dylan and Wes, Kevin and Joe, the other guys that go out to properties, they've been to another several hundred. I just talked about the numbers today. I know Kevin will go to about 60, Joe will go to about, or somewhere around there, and Joe will go to about 70. Wes goes to typically about 15 to 18 because he's our full-time seed manager, and Dylan, you're probably in about 65, 70 days out in the field. So we see several hundred properties a year, and when you look at that, we see a recurring problem of too many does. It has a lot of damage to your hunt, your ability to grow a good herd and a balanced herd. And so just trust me on this one. We have the experience to see this. We're not making this stuff up. Our job is to actually analyze, learn, ask why, and then decipher it in every habitat location, and address those concepts that we believe in my books, my web classes that I teach on the YouTube channel for free, and dissect those, and then look at your property and say, this is what you need to do. And one of those problems you see as a reoccurring problem, that's a fact, is too many does. And so summer doe herd, that summer doe factory is a real problem on properties all across the country. And we're doing things to make sure we limit that. Now, again, going back to this field right here, one of the reasons we put it all into clover is because we wanted to build the soil. It's something that is taking shape. This clover on this field is taking shape over the last 2 growing seasons. So it's been, we've been working on this plot since 2020. So it's come a long ways. It looks beautiful right now. But Dylan, does it make you a little sick to see this?
You're killing this beautiful clover.
Yeah, I mean, something that Dylan and I, we might differ on how you want to lay this out or how it looks, but we both agree. Even Dylan said, what did you say about 1.25 acres of clover is just too much?
That's too much. Yep.
Yeah, and I agree. It's too much by about 3/4 of an acre. So we're gonna take that, notch it down. I don't want a bunch of does and fawns residing here all summer, and we're gonna slant it so we have a huge amount of diversity in the heart of the season. We'll take advantage of those low nitrogen requiring peas and beans within that mix, following a great boost to the soil right here. And we expect some very good plots. And most of all, on the entire property, we don't want a bunch of does and fawns. If they trickle on in October, great, but we're not going to lose any bucks for that at that time. And again, it's all about managing the resources for balance. Too many does is a bad thing. You're never going to have a property of too many bucks. Just because if it's attractive enough for bucks, does are going to be there. So you always have that balance, which is a really good thing. And we're striving for balance in sex ratios, age structure, herd populations, and maintaining balance of the habitat. Those are the QDM principles that I've lived by for a very long time. And I want you to too, because it supplies a great hunt and a great herd. You can't have one without the other. And I hope you experience both this fall.